This is the oral interview of United States District Judge Daniel Hovland for the Oral History Project for the Historical Society of the United States Courts in the Eighth Circuit. It's Wednesday, September 23, 2020. We're at the William Guy Federal Building in Bismarck, North Dakota. And first of all, Judge Hovland, thank you for taking the time to be interviewed for this oral history project.
Thank you for coming out to Bismarck to conduct these interviews.
We'll start with some formalities, I guess, and we'd like to have your full name and your date and place of birth.
Daniel Lee Hovland, born on November 10, 1954 in Moorhead, Minnesota.
And as far as current family, married, kids, grandkids, things like that?
I'm married to Kristen. We've been married 32 years. I have a stepson, Brandon, who's 40 years old, and Kristen and I had two kids. Mark, my son, is 30 years old. He's a medical doctor in Iowa, and my daughter, Lexi, is 26. She works in the marketing department at North Dakota State University.
Oh, it's quite a array of kids and what they're doing. You must be very proud.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the path they've taken.
Okay. As far as your childhood, you mentioned Moorhead, Minnesota being your birthplace. Did you grow up in the Moorhead, Fargo area?
I actually grew up in Barnesville, Minnesota until I was in about second grade, and then my father took a job with First Bank, now U.S. Bank in Fargo, so we moved to Moorhead in 1963, and I grew up in the Moorhead school system and attended grade school, junior high, high schools at Moorhead High School.
Do you follow the Spuds hockey?
I was a Moorhead Spud, but I was a basketball player there. But followed hockey too.
So how was your basketball team?
Our basketball teams were always good at Moorhead High. Bill Quinnett was the coach there, and they had very successful teams.
When did you graduate from high school?
1972.
Following high school, what were your plans?
Well, I had a few basketball scholarships, but I ended up going to Concordia College in Moorhead, private school there, and initially I was going to pursue a degree in teaching and Phi Ed. I was really interested in teaching and coaching more than anything. Probably coaching at the college level was what my interests were further down the line, but I changed that route after about my first year of school and started pursuing a degree in history and political science with law school in mind.
Okay. Was there something about, maybe going to law school, or just you had a change of heart, or?
No, I really hadn't thought much about law school, but I had a advisor, Dr. Harding Noblet. He's now deceased, but he was my school advisor, and he's the one that planted the seed in my head about giving some thought to law school. And he strongly recommended that I think about that. And he had a number of students that had gone on to pursue degrees in law, and it was really at his insistence or urging, I guess, that I thought about law school for the
You didn't really
first
have
time.
any friends, relatives, or anything like that who were encouraging you as this professor at Concordia?
I had none of those. My father had a couple of good friends that were lawyers in the Fargo-Moorhead area. I know Dave Landberg was one of them, and but I had never really had any close contacts with lawyers.
Okay.
I'd given some thought to medical school when I first started at Concordia College, but after going through a couple of chemistry labs and organic chemistry type courses, that squelched that desire pretty quickly.
So did you enjoy your years over with the Cobbers in Concordia?
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It's a really great school, and small classes with professors that really knew you pretty intimately, and yeah, it was a great school, a great environment.
Maybe even attended the Christmas concert once or twice.
I went to all the Christmas concerts there, yeah.
So at some point then, as you're approaching graduation or finishing college, what were your thoughts then? I mean, were you formulating a plan maybe to go to law school or take the LSAT?
Yeah, I did, and then I was looking at law schools primarily in the Twin Cities as well as UND, but decided on UND Law School fairly early in the game. And started school up there right away in the fall of '76 after I had graduated from Concordia.
Was law school what you thought it would be, or were you just kind of surprised about the intensity sometimes that first year?
Well, like most people in the first year, you have no idea what the expectations are of the professors and how much studying that you have to do. Going into law school there, I know that the class before ours, it started out with about 115 students, and there were almost a third of them that had flunked out after the first year. So that was a little nerve-wracking for most of us. But we started out with about the same number of students, and once you got through the first semester and really the first year, it was a much more pleasant experience. But that first semester was nerve-wracking, as it is for everybody.
As you went through law school, do you clerk at all, have part-time jobs, summer jobs? What was your experience like?
My first summer after the first year of law school, I clerked at the Nilles firm in Fargo. My dad knew a couple of the lawyers over there, and they had never had summer law clerks before, and so I went over there and worked with maybe a half a dozen of the attorneys in that firm. They were located downtown Fargo, a large insurance defense firm, and that was really a great experience. I learned a little bit about what the practice of law was all about. Had an opportunity to sit in on a number of depositions and hearings for the first time in my life. So that was really a great experience. After my second year of law school, I got a clerkship in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Fargo. Jim Britton was the U.S. Attorney at the time. Lynn Crooks and Gary Anir were two of the most experienced prosecutors in that office, and that was really the most fun I ever had at a clerkship experience. Yeah. Got to sit in on a number of criminal trials with both of those prosecutors who were really some of the finest lawyers that I had ever encountered up until that point in time.
So how did your first year of law school match up with those two experiences? Those kind of solidified your decision, hey, I made the right choice? Or
yeah,
not?
No question about it. Yeah, I really knew I was on the right path after those summer experiences and those first few years of law school.
Any other recollections, good, bad, indifferent, advice for people about law school?
No, I really cherished my time at UND. I thought it was a really good law school. The professors were, I felt, genuinely interested in your doing well and succeeding in school, and it was just a great experience. I know now the classes aren't nearly as large as what ours had been, and that maybe is even a better learning environment. But yeah, it was really a great law school. And since that time, I've hired every one of my law clerks out of UND Law School to date.
And that's a lot of law clerks, I assume.
It is, yeah.
Having done that, I mean, again, I know law clerks' positions are really prized, number one. Would you say that UND has really good quality lawyers coming out of that school?
Oh, I think they're as good as any other law school in the country. When I first got on the federal bench, we were encouraged to use a system called Oscar that solicits applications from people all over the country for law clerk positions, and I would get 700-800 applications every time there was a position that was opened. And some of the finest law schools in the country and excellent students, but I tried to focus my hiring on UND, and as long as I could find well-qualified, competent people out of that law school, I was going to continue to hire there, and I've had just tremendous luck with the law clerks that I've hired from that law school, which I think is as good as any in the country.
I have to ask, did you become a hockey fan up there?
Oh, absolutely. I went to law school from 76 to 79, and when Gino Gasparini took over the team in 1978, they were runners-up, I think, this first year, and I went to every hockey game that I could when I was in law school.
So as you're going through law school and you had a clerkship with a private firm and a clerkship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, what were you looking at for, potential career once you left law school?
Well, that I wasn't really certain about, like a lot of people getting out of law school. I wasn't really certain whether I wanted to practice law in a larger firm or a smaller firm at that point in time, or whether I was looking at a government position or a position as a prosecutor in a state's attorney's office. I just wasn't really certain. So I ended up applying for and getting a one-year clerkship at the North Dakota Supreme Court. I was hired by Chief Justice Ralph Erikstead for that one-year position, and it gave me a little time to gain some exposure to the law firms in North Dakota and try to sort out what I best was interested in pursuing at that stage.
I know those clerkships with the North Dakota Supreme Court are really prized. I mean, did you find that a valuable experience for you?
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. Chief Justice Erikstead was a great mentor, and just sitting in on the oral arguments and reading the briefs from lawyers throughout the state and from out-of-state lawyers as well, you learn a lot about what good lawyering means and good brief writing, and just being around the other law clerks and particularly the other justices of the Supreme Court. It was a really great experience.
Was there any cases that you remember working on that were significant back then, or is it all kind of a blur at this time?
Yeah, it really becomes a blur after a while. But Chief Justice Erikstead was really good about just turning cases over to myself and to, giving me a lot of free rein to research and write with his input. And I can't remember any specific cases offhand, but it was an experience that I'd encourage anyone to pursue if they're thinking about a clerkship.
And those are for a year, so what were you thinking as you went through that year about what's next?
Well, I'd been exposed to a number of really good firms in Bismarck, but when I went into the clerkship, my plans were really to probably head back to Minnesota, looking for positions in the Twin Cities area. And during my one-year clerkship, I applied for a number of positions with law firms in the Twin Cities area. I had an offer from a few firms down in the Twin Cities, larger insurance defense type firms. I had applied for and been given an interview out at Dow Chemical in Midland, Michigan. I was giving serious thought to that. Just working in their corporate counsel office, they had 10 or 12 attorneys that worked in that position. But eventually, I ended up applying for a job in the Attorney General's office in North Dakota. I thought I'd have an opportunity to do a wide range of different kinds of work in that office, and I knew some of the people that were working in that office from my dealings with them while clerking at the North Dakota Supreme Court. So I applied for a position there. Alan Olson was the Attorney General at the time. He's the one that interviewed me, and he encouraged me to take the position, but he also suggested that I not stay there for more than 2 to 3 years if I really wanted to practice law, because I felt gave me some good advice that if I stayed longer than that, I wouldn't be as marketable to private law firms. And although there's a lot of people that have made long-term careers working as assistant attorney generals and do a very good job, I think it's really challenging, interesting work. But I worked there for about 3 years and then took a position with Fleck Mather Stretz and Mayer in Bismarck.
When you were with the Attorney General's office, did you have any, again, significant cases that you handled, or responsibilities, or learned something you found valuable later in private practice?
Well, the most significant case I got involved in there was the ARC lawsuit, Association for Retarded Citizens versus the state of North Dakota. And Rick Johnson was working in the office at the time. He and I were assigned to work on that case, and then Al Wolf, a local attorney, was retained to work on that case. We all pretty much spent full time on that lawsuit for at least a year. It was a major effort by the ARC to try to deinstitutionalize the facilities in the state that housed people with developmental disabilities. And it was a long, contested litigation that ended up going to trial in federal court. And as a result of that trial, the state of North Dakota was ordered to start depopulating those facilities over a course of time to try to place more of those individuals with developmental disabilities in residence-based facilities and get them out of an institutional setting, which was all good,
Sure.
positive work.
So what attracted you to go into private practice with Fleck, Mather, and Strutz?
Just seeing their work product up at the North Dakota Supreme Court. And I had some friends that were working in that law firm at the time, people that I had worked in the AG's office with, Brian Biella, John Morrison, both of whom had worked for the state AG's office and had ended up over there. I knew Steve Storsley, who had been working there for a few years, and I had been introduced to Bill Strutz by Chief Justice Erikstead. They were friends for many years, and Chief Justice Erikstead had always conveyed to me the fact that he thought that it was a really good law firm with a wide-ranging practice, a lot of very good lawyers. So through those contacts, I reached out and applied for a position there when they had some openings.
And you would have started there when?
I started there in the summer of 1983, I believe it was, just as an associate and doing a wide range of work. Worked closely with Bill Strutz, who was doing a lot of medical malpractice defense work at the time, but also worked for most of the other partners doing a wide range
Sure.
of civil type of work. And
I have a recollection that you've actually tried medical malpractice cases, so
tried a lot of medical malpractice cases.
which
yeah.
are very difficult. Worked with a lot of experts, I assume.
Yeah, it involves all of those things. But I had an opportunity at the Fleck Law Firm to really work in a wide range of areas, not only medical malpractice work, but personal injury, product
Sure.
liability work, employment law disputes, civil rights actions, and from that, kind of narrowed down the areas of the law that I was most interested in, and those were really personal injury, product liability types of cases. I enjoyed trials.
Still enjoy trials as a judge, I assume.
I love trials, yeah. I've had an opportunity to try a lot of cases as a federal judge, usually somewhere in the range of 20 cases a year, and I just tried a 1-week-long trial last week, a criminal case involving a drug conspiracy, and trials are always fun. The stories are always entertaining.
You're in the right line of work then.
Yeah.
You were at Fleck, Mather, and Strutz for how long?
I was there until 1994, I think it was, and then a few of us left and started our own firm. I went over and began work with Sheldon Smith, Randy Bakke, Paul Oppegard was an attorney in Fargo-Moorhead area that I had gone to undergrad school with, and we formed a partnership in a law firm. And at that time, I think when we started out, we had 7 or 8 lawyers involved, and I worked there until I was nominated to the federal judgeship.
When you were there, again, did you focus on personal injury, a wide range of cases? What was your kind of everyday work?
Yeah, it was more personal injury, wrongful death cases. I ended up doing a lot of work for political subdivisions throughout the state, school districts, park districts, cities, municipalities, counties. Did a lot of their defense work throughout the state. Had a lot of trial experience as a result of that. I continued to do medical malpractice defense work, but had an opportunity to try a lot of cases and get involved in a wide range of civil.
What advice would you give to budding lawyers who want to be in private practice? I mean, as you look back at it, not just being in it, but looking back now on it, what qualities are necessary? What do you need to do? How do you succeed?
Well, I would encourage people to, if they are interested in private practice, to get involved with a firm that handles a wide range of different types of cases so that you can gain that experience. But more than anything, I believe it's treating your coworkers and your associates and partners with some dignity and respect, and treating others that you deal with in the workplace and in the practice of law with some civility and kindness and respect, because it goes a long way to not only promoting your practice, but just showing others that you're a good, decent lawyer, that works hard and is honest and straightforward.
Good principles for life.
Right.
You became a judge again when?
In 2002, late 2002.
Okay. You've been a sitting judge ever since. I think you recently took senior status, is that right?
Took senior status on my 65th birthday, which was November 10th of 2019.
And we'll get back into your judicial career a little bit, but as far as the future, you're going to be on senior status for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, senior status is designed to let judges work as little or as much as they want to. Right now I'm working essentially full-time, carrying a full caseload, but I hope to whittle down those cases over time. But we've got a pretty significant backlog of cases right now. There was a 2-year period from October of 2017 to November of 2019 where I was the only federal judge in North Dakota. So we ended up with a pretty significant backlog. During that 2-year stint, actually what happened is Ralph Erickson was elevated to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, and he left in August or October of 2017. And then Peter Welty wasn't nominated and confirmed until, I believe, October of 2019, somewhere in that time frame. And we were the only federal district court in the country among the 94 districts that did not have a senior judge. So I was the only one holding a seat there for about a 2-year period. So we've developed quite a backlog of cases during that time frame.
Going back to becoming a judge then, again, for the purposes of the interview and for historical purposes, how do you become a judge then? You've been nominated, you get confirmed by the Senate. How do they prepare you to be a judge, they being the judicial branch of the government?
Well, it's a good question. Most people that come onto the federal bench either have extensive experience in the civil arena or criminal, but rarely do people have experience in both, so you're at somewhat of a disadvantage coming in with experience in only one of those specialties. But the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts, based in Washington, provides training and education for federal judges, and they do a superb job of preparing people to serve on the federal bench.
So when you finally got on the bench, so to speak, and took over trials and things, did you find anything really different than you had anticipated?
Not really. I had my first criminal trial about 2 weeks into my start as a judge, so I was a little bit uneasy about how that would go, having never been involved in a criminal trial before. But once the trial started and jury selection had happened, the rules of evidence are the same for criminal cases as they are for civil cases. And I had tried a lot of civil cases as an attorney, so I was familiar with how trials are handled. And the lawyering that I've seen at the federal level, both in the criminal side of cases and the civil, has been excellent. Really good, experienced trial lawyers, which makes it a lot easier for trial judges when you're dealing with experienced trial lawyers. So there wasn't anything that immediately came up that was that I had not encountered before as an attorney in private practice trying a case.
If you could, you try civil cases and criminal cases, and I know criminal cases might involve sentencing. That brings me up just to ask, do you find certain aspects of the job maybe not more difficult but more challenging, like sentencing or something like that?
Oh, I would think if you interviewed most federal judges, they'll tell you that sentencing is probably the most difficult part of their job. And when I first got on the bench, the sentencing was largely governed by what are called the federal sentencing guidelines, which have been in existence since 1987, but they largely dictate the sentence ranges that are to be imposed in criminal cases. When I first became a judge, the federal sentencing guidelines were mandatory, so you didn't have to give much thought to most sentencing. But about 14, 15 years ago, that all changed. The United States Supreme Court issued a couple of decisions that essentially said that the guidelines will now be treated as advisory rather than mandatory. And it gave federal judges at the district court level much more discretion for sentencing than we ever had before when the guidelines were mandatory. And I believe that most federal judges were strongly in favor of having more discretion than what we had when the guidelines were mandatory. But sentencing always poses a lot of emotional issues, and it weighs on you when you think about taking somebody's liberties away for 10, 15, 20 years, or even a lifetime. When the sentencing guidelines were mandatory and I was dealing with defendants in drug cases that had extensive criminal histories, more often than not, they were facing life sentences in the federal system if convicted at a trial. If they had 2 prior felony drug offenses on their record and they're charged with a third in the federal system, it was a mandatory life sentence. And that weighs on any judge when you're imposing that kind of sentence on anyone. So I would think, I would have to say that sentencing is probably the most difficult part of the job, but
Do you have a part of the job that's kind of more emotionally rewarding? I hear things like judges like to do immigration swearing in of new citizens, things like that, but that would be an example. I mean, the things that you just kind of look forward to doing.
well, naturalization ceremonies are always pleasant, happy experiences. You walk in the courtroom and everybody's got a smile on their face, which is not something I usually encounter. And it's just a happy, joyous occasion for those persons that are going to become the newest citizens of this country, as well as all of their family that are present. Those are undoubtedly the most positive, enjoyable experiences.
Over the course of your career, I mean, can you mention some of the more challenging cases civilly or criminally that you've had that come to mind?
Lately, in the last few years, I've had a number of trials involving drug overdoses that really weigh on one pretty strongly. Cases resulting from overdoses of opiates, or more often than not, heroin laced with fentanyl. It's an epidemic in our state right now that's gotten 10 times worse in just the last few years. It really started with the oil boom 4 or 5 years ago, but it's escalated since then. It did not slow down with the oil boom at all, and I've had a number of cases involving fatalities from drug overdoses, usually young people, heroin addicts that ingest some substance that they have no idea what it contains, and it more often than not contains fentanyl or some synthetic fentanyl that will cause death almost instantly. Those have been difficult cases. And the trials and just the general criminal cases involving serious charges of physical abuse and sex abuse of children and child pornography offenses, those are difficult cases. I had one just but a few weeks ago where I sentenced some gentleman to 20 years in federal prison who had physically assaulted a young child in his care and custody who was a foster child, 9-month-old child that had been physically abused over the course of 2 or 3 months, ended up with lifelong injuries, physical disabilities, blindness, a whole wide range of physical problems that will plague that young girl for the rest of her life. She needs 24-hour nursing care. And I've seen a lot of those types of cases over the last 17, 18 years where young children, innocent young children, have been victimized by defendants. And and their lives and the lives of those close to them have been impacted for forever.
Would it be fair to say that in your career you probably tried more more criminal cases than civil cases?
Oh, undoubtedly, yeah. Nationwide in the federal system, it's just somewhere in the range of 1% to 2% of civil cases get tried, and I have probably tried just a handful of civil cases each year. Most are jury trials, but also some court trials every year. Criminal cases take up far more of the courtroom time for not only trials, but just hearings in general.
Sure.
95+% of my time is spent on criminal cases in the courtrooms.
What advice would you give lawyers appearing before you, whether it's civil or criminal? I mean, you've seen, I'm sure, a wide range of experience and conduct, and good, bad, and indifferent probably, but what advice would you give?
Well, the best lawyers that I encounter are those that are straightforward and honest and treat other attorneys and all those that they deal with dignity and respect and civility. People that are civil and respectful to one another usually tend to be the most successful attorneys and the best trial lawyers. It's not always the person that has the greatest oral skills and skills of cross-examination, and more often than not, it's people that work hard and try to be honest and forthright in their dealings, and not only dealings with people, but in how they present the case at trial and how they deal with the judge and the judge's law clerks and the people from the clerk's office that are involved in trials. You learn a lot about people and seeing how they treat others throughout the work setting.
Since we're in a kind of a techno environment today, what changes have you seen, whether it's in law or in judicial practice and technology, and how it's impacted you?
Oh, my. You know as well as I do, Bob. There have been some pretty significant changes. When I was in school, college, and law school, we didn't have computers. Nobody had laptops or cell phones. When I clerked at the North Dakota Supreme Court and worked in the Attorney General's office, nobody had laptops or computers. It wasn't until I joined the Fleck firm in 1983, and it probably was 3-4 years after I was at the firm, that we got our first laptop computer. Probably weighed 20 pounds at the time, and I had no idea how to use it, nor did most of my cohorts at the time. Since those days, now we can handle most everything on a cell phone. That's the best of computers nowadays. So we didn't have the luxury and the advantage of growing up with computers like attorneys nowadays do, and the law clerks that I have hired, these young people coming out of law school are so intelligent and so savvy about the use of computers and technology and doing legal research in a very expeditious, much more effective manner than you and I ever had to do it when we were in practice. It was all books at that time and shepherdizing cases, and most people didn't have law libraries in their firms. We had to go up to the North Dakota Supreme Court to use their law library until Westlaw and those services became available, but that was not in the 70s and 80s. And it's changed dramatically.
Yeah. What about as a judge? I mean, we're in a COVID environment right now. I mean, has the technology helped you handle cases, or if so, how?
Yeah, it has. In the federal system, they've been paperless for probably 15 years. It wasn't that way when I first started, but within a few years after I got on the bench, they implemented the CMECF system as a case management electronic case filing system where everything became paperless. The federal system did it long before the state system ever did. And as a result of that, we're able to work from any setting, whether it's doing legal research or just myself reading case files. I can do all that from home, my car, or the office quite easily. With the pandemic that plagued us all beginning in mid-March, things closed down in the federal courthouse for several months, and we were all quarantined in our homes, so to speak, for that period of time. So my staff and myself were trying to generate most of our work from a home environment using computers. So it's helped tremendously, but you still can't beat being there face-to-face with people and your staff.
Yeah.
And
I noticed there was a trial going on upstairs, and you mentioned a recent trial or something like that. Are trials back on track now for live testimony and live participation?
they are. We started up again in August. We actually started bringing attorneys and people into the courtrooms in mid-July, I believe it was. We were struggling for a good month to try to figure out how best and how safest to conduct jury trials. Most federal courts throughout the country are still not conducting jury trials, but we started up in late August. Judge Welty had the first trial, I think, in mid-August out in Fargo. I had my first trial since the pandemic surfaced here just last week. I had a week-long drug conspiracy case that was tried in Bismarck here. That was the first jury trial that we've had in the federal courthouse.
What kind of precautions do you have to take right now?
Well, it's much different than what it was before. A jury selection we had to conduct in 2 separate courtrooms rather than bringing all the prospective jurors into one courtroom, so that we could adequately social distance. We had to use 2 courtrooms with microphones set up in both for people to respond to questions. Judge Welty's first trial in Fargo took about a full day to pick a jury, but I was able to select a jury in about a half a day, which is my normal course. But it is much more burdensome. And then when we selected the 12 jurors, we could not put all of them in the jury box. To socially distance, we had to space them out throughout the well of the courtroom, so we had 3 or 4 in the jury box and the others spread out around the front of the courtroom near the parties. We require masks for all people coming into the courthouse. We have plastic shields up in front of the witness box and in other areas of the courtroom. Trying to follow the CDC guidelines, but they seem to change frequently too. We're all learning week by week, day by day, how best to do this safely and efficiently so that people are comfortable coming into federal court. I was very concerned last week about the case carrying over beyond a week and into the next week and losing jurors for the weekend, and then having somebody come back who had a family member or some close friend that had been exposed, and how that would impact a trial. So that's a never-ending concern that we have until things settle down nationwide with this virus.
I forgot to ask you. I should have started, but I'll ask you now. And as far as community activities, I know you were involved in the Y at some time, maybe still are. What community activities are you involved in or have been involved in that you care to mention? Not everything, but
I was on the Missouri Valley YMC Board of Directors for 5 or 6 years. I was president for part of that stint. I served on the Bismarck Park Board for 12 years, and I was president for 4 or 5 of those years, I believe. I would have loved to have continued to serve on the Bismarck Park Board, but when I became a federal judge, they have a code of ethics that prohibits you from running for any public office. So I finished out my last term on the park board, and then I had to leave that position 2004 or 2006, somewhere around that time frame. Those were the 2 organizations that I had the most community involvement in, but they were both wonderful groups to be associated with.
When you were on the park board, did you have any significant projects that you kind of really liked to shepherd along or take a keen interest in that were going on back then?
Well, we put in about 45 miles of bike trails throughout the community. When I was on the park board, we added on to Schaumburg Arena, constructed the VFW All Seasons Hockey Arena, the Golf Dome on the east side of town that's not only a a resource for golf, but in the winter months there's baseball and softball and football practices and soccer events going on almost daily there. Those are the ones that come to mind. I guess we built a new Pebble Creek golf course when I was on the park board. It was a great experience. I served with 4 other people that were just wonderful colleagues, and we all got along wonderfully. Steve New was the director of the park district when I was a park board member, and Steve and his associate Randy Bina were really positive influences in Bismarck, and ran one of the finest park district organizations in the country in terms of the facilities and programs that are offered to people in the community.
You know, you started out in Moorhead, going to high school there. You went to Concordia, UND Law School, and you ever sit here today or reflect back and say, how did I get here and what a ride, or something like that? I mean, what are your just kind of thoughts on your career?
Well, people our age, I think constantly wondering where the time went. It seems like it scurried by rather quickly. It seemed like yesterday I was working at the Fleck Law Firm, and I was just an associate there, starting out learning all about the practice of law and billing and marketing. It just goes by so fast, and I guess you realize that as you get older, the time flies awfully fast. But I don't have any reservations about any of the decisions that I made in terms of my work or my family. I've enjoyed what I've been doing for a long time. This job as a federal judge is the greatest job I've ever had and the most enjoyable job. I've never once gotten up in the morning and regretted having to go to work. Never once has that been a part of my thought process. And I felt the same way when I was in private practice. I enjoyed going to work. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. And I think that's a big part of anybody's work life. If you enjoy what you're doing and enjoy the people that you're working with, it doesn't seem like work.
How would you like to be remembered?
Well, probably in terms of my work as a federal judge, that I was an honest, hardworking person that treated people that appeared in my courtroom with dignity and respect at all times. I mean, I try to treat people the way that I would want to be treated. I hope that people that come in the courtroom, whether they're in a civil case or a criminal case, feel that they've been given a fair shot, that I've listened to their arguments, that they've been treated respectfully throughout the process. I would hope that that people would remember that I've kept the wheels of justice moving in the federal court system, and hopefully made it an environment that attorneys feel welcome and encouraged to venue their cases in this courthouse. But that's primarily it.
Is there anything else about your career as a judge you'd like to share with us today? Something we might not have covered that you can recall as significant or interesting? Being
on the bench here, I do want to mention that the staff up here at the federal courthouse is been phenomenal. In fact, as every place that I've worked as a lawyer, I've been surrounded by good people, good lawyers, and good support staff, and this federal courthouse is no exception. The people in the clerk's office, the United States Probation Office, the U.S. Marshals Service, and my law clerks are all just top-notch professionals. That it makes my job pretty easy. I don't think that you'll find any federal judge that'll tell you that he or she does all of their own research and writing and doesn't need any support staff to do their work efficiently. Without the law clerks of mine, I would have a difficult job keeping up with things. They make any judge look good, and they've certainly made my job a lot easier by being there by my side helping out. But the same holds true for the people in the clerk's office and and the other offices that I mentioned. They're all really great professionals in this building. And I've also, I'm proud of the fact that I've been directly involved in hiring the full-time magistrate judges that have served in the past and are currently serving. Alice Seneschal, and I wasn't involved in Karen Klein's hiring, but I worked with Judge Klein for a number of years. She's just a wonderful judge, and I tried cases in front of her, and she was one of the finest trial judges that I ever tried cases in front of. But Magistrate Seneschal and Charles Miller and Claire Hochhalter are all people who I was a chief judge at the time and involved in their hiring, and I believe they're just top-notch professionals that are going to serve and have served this district well.
One last chance. Anything else you can think about being a judge that you'd like to share with us?
No, I just have really appreciated the honor and the privilege of being able to serve as a federal judge. It's a great job. It's an important position, but I would not be in the position that I am but for the many people that supported me along the way, including the senators that I previously mentioned and Governor Hovland. But it's been an honor and a privilege. I love this job, and I have cherished the opportunity to come to work every day.
I'll just say, as one of those lawyers out there, I think your comments about dignity and respect and kindness to other people, that's what people say about you, and I'll say it too. Your reputation is excellent in that regard.
Thank you.
Judge Hovland, thank you for taking the time for this oral interview today. It's been a pleasure. It's really great to see you, and it's been very, very professionally rewarding for me just to sit here and talk to you.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to travel out to Bismarck. It's nice to see you again, Bob.
You bet.